podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavior Health Today, a Triad production. I'm your host, Dr. Graham Taylor, and today I'm joined by Ragan Schriver. Regan is an associate professor of practice at the University of Tennessee's College of Social Work, as well as the director of the MSW program, Knoxville campus, and chair of the Forensic Social Work Certification program. He also teaches clinical and leadership courses in the MSW program. Regan also serves as a special assistant to the president of Catholic Charities USA to develop integrated healthcare programs within their network. On today's podcast, we're talking about Regan's certification program in trauma-informed care through the University of Tennessee's College of Social Work. Regan, welcome. It's so nice to have you.
Thanks, Graham. You forgot to also say that I'm an avid Behavioral Health Today fan.
Well, that is very kind. You said that at the very beginning before we even came on. So thank you for your listenership and that encouragement. That's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Regan, as we start out today, would you kindly just give us a 2-minute drill on your background, both in terms of being in the priesthood and coming into that, and in mental health and social work and your doctorate in psychology, and maybe even toss in how asking for a burning bush encounter can be helpful in determining one's life's direction and course?
I'm a social worker, I think would be my first thing that I would describe myself. I just feel that social work as a profession and as a field is just speaks to my heart and to my values. And I love the profession. So I was lucky enough to be able to, while I was in the seminary studying to be a Catholic priest, I got my master's degree in social work at Washington University in St. Louis. And from there, I just had some doors open that were so great. I worked at an eating disorder unit that was an inpatient facility. I taught at our Catholic high school and got to coach some sports. That was awesome. I worked in a facility that treated folks. It was more of a treatment component for persons that had been in prison or had been in jail. Okay. And it was an alternative sentencing program. And then I was 15 years as the executive director of the Catholic Charities Agency in East Tennessee. So we had all kinds of programs from behavioral health to housing to feeding and all that. And so I also carried a clinical caseload while I was the director. Then that job was just a great adventure. And then now I'm on this cool thing where I'm sort of in an ivory tower where I'm working at a national office, the Catholic Charities USA national office, trying to provide services to providers, and then also getting to teach students and learn from them about social work and about clinical treatment as well as leadership within organizations and communities. So
really good.
I've been just lucky to be able to do the stuff I've been able to do.
Really good. Well, you got to give our listeners a little bit of a sense of that burning bush encounter.
Oh yeah. So when I was very first considering, should I be a priest? What should I do with my life? And so somebody had asked me about this. And so I just said, hey, I wish God made burning bushes. It would make it so easy. Just here, go do this. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I wish God still made burning bushes like he did once, I guess a long time ago. And so then after that comment, it sort of stood out in my mind because people were joking me about it. And I went home to see my mom that afternoon and she said, hey, look at this card I got in the mail. And the card had a picture on it and it was a burning bush.
That's classic.
The rest is history, I guess.
There it was, brother. Sometimes you just have to ask, huh?
Yeah.
That's classic. That's really good. Hey, I want to get into your program that you offer certification in, but I want to find out just a little bit more first. What in your personal and in your professional life brought you to create this course in trauma?
Gosh, I could go on for hours about this, but we know that professionally, I'll start. That in the late 90s, this study was done on adverse childhood experiences. And I know that you all have addressed this on this podcast, and that demonstrated that roughly 64% of a largely middle class sample, very large sample of the population in the United States had experienced at least one adverse experience that we could also refer to as trauma. So we just see the large number of our population across the country that are dealing with and the ramifications of a big event in their life. And so that opened my mind a bit to try to understand what's all that mean. And then I think also professionally, working at an eating disorder unit with folks that have been in prison, working with folks who are largely in poverty and homeless through the Catholic Charities years, there was so many times that people asked, what's wrong with this person? What's wrong with this person? Why are they acting like this? Why are they going back to jail? What's going on? It's all their fault. It's them. It's blame the victim. And so this concept of switching the story from what's wrong with them to what happened to them, what is in their history, what led them down this path. I remember a moment. I was in a group therapy session with a woman at the alternative sentencing program. And she was describing her life, and she had stolen things from a store and a number of other issues in her life. And I was sitting there listening to her, and I thought, oh my gosh, this isn't her fault. No wonder she's doing what she's doing. And I think it's because of the trauma. And so that just opened a whole door to me. And then thank goodness I got placed at the University of Tennessee, where they've got a real emphasis on this at our College of Social Work, where there is an emphasis on trauma responsive, trauma informed care. So that's really a professional path that opened my heart to this. And then just secondly, just my own life. I mean, we are all 64% of the population. Have experienced some sort of trauma in their history. And so I haven't escaped that. And so, they say that if you're in psychology or social work, it's trying to help yourself. And so I can't say that I'm not alone there, I guess.
Really good. I appreciate that. You're talking about, maybe we kind of start going into a little bit of your certification program and the things that you begin to emphasize. And you talked about a way that you can be responsive to understanding somebody and explain things in another way. I know your program emphasizes being trauma-informed and trauma-responsive. Share with us how you distinguish between the two of these and how you bring these into your training as you train your students.
Well, this is great. I feel like that trauma-informed could be that I'm aware of it. I know that it's there. I know that people are experiencing this. I know that big statistic. I know that the more traumatic experiences that people have, maybe the higher likelihood that there might be some adverse negative impact on a person's health and their health outcomes and their longevity and expected life outcome.
Kind of knowledge-based stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Just that I know this stuff. But then hopefully the responsive part is that I can view myself, if I'm a provider, say, I want to tell the students, I tell all the students, I think we have this image of if I'm a therapist, someday I can sit back and kind of stroke my chin and I know what's wrong with you as you lay on this couch, and I'm going to help, I'm going to be the one, I'm going to take care of it all. You worry about it. But like the idea is that I'm a collaborator. The person that's coming to see us has lived maybe many cases, very difficult situations, but there's also these huge strengths that have been able to come to this point where they can reach out and get this help. But to think about that I want to collaborate with them on their issues and strengths and help them grow from there. I want to walk with them. I want to join arms and walk with them, not be, treating or doing things to someone. So I feel like that's more this trauma responsive thing from my perspective.
I really like that. I know you've got, as part of your model, in terms of being responsive, you're teaching your students to actively respond to an individual struggle. Almost like a meta view of what is this that's underneath here, trying to really kind of a paradigm shift in some ways that moves from more kind of a blame and shame focus to one that works to collaborate. I love that word, collaboratively understand with the patient what in their life explains this. Not that we're going to, not condone something. It's not about that. It's about understanding in a collaborative way. So this paradigm shift is really looking to create that collaborative piece and relationally maybe help them kind of review and understand that these things have some meaning, don't they?
Yes. I love that you used the word relationally. I think that so many people, like if we think about persons the population who's experienced trauma, that relationships have often been very damaging, and that maybe there's a fear of engaging in a relationship, or that the therapeutic relationship, if it's a case manager or a case worker or a social worker or a therapist or a counselor or whoever, or a psychologist, that you're in this relationship that can be corrective, that can be a renewal, that the attachment process can really be a healing process for the person. And so this is what's so tough, I think, for us that are engaged in this work, especially those that the students we're teaching that are going out and working with folks that are on kind of in the front line, are that you're using yourself, that there's a use of self in this process. That isn't just, I'm not just using my head and teaching you something, although there is a component of that, but I'm using myself. I am in a real relationship with you as my client. And I think I love that you pointed that out.
Regan, what I like about that piece is that oftentimes, we think, well, we did a show on trauma with Guy McPherson, who talks about working with trauma as well. And he was talking about when he first came into the field, he's saying, well, what workshop do I need to go to? And what books do I need to read? All important. But what he said is very similar to what you're describing. He says he came to realize it's what I'm bringing to that interaction, to that moment with a person is going to be most healing. The information is just kind of what holds it all together. But it's the increasing of the understanding that really is where the therapeutic piece is, and the corrective emotional experiences that we can provide somebody through that corrective experience as therapists that you're describing. And I've watched you, and you talked about the brain's neuroplasticity and how, because of our ruptured attachments growing up, that we in that corrective experience with that person can actually help create new connections and kind of shape some healthy healing and also some growth. Say more about that part.
Oh, like, since just we started talking today, I think both of our brains are a little bit different in a positive way,
Yes.
So I think that if you think about it, that whenever we're engaging with someone, that the brain is always firing and traveling new connections and stuff. The difficult struggle thing, and that I feel like want our students to know and want everybody to know, is that how important those early life attachments are. You're within the first few months of life. And so I feel like many of our social workers that are in child welfare are working with families and individuals that the neglect and that kind of early trauma can be so completely damaging, because the neurons aren't being connected in those years where it's so ready to be, the brain's ready to grow and ready to relate. But if that's not happening, it can be really stunt you for your life relationally and emotionally in that. So I just feel like that's so important. But all is not ever lost just because you've had a tough early life. So many things can rebound, and we call that resiliency. That's like the resilience idea of pulling on a rubber band. You stretch the rubber band as far as you can, but it goes back to where it was. That's kind of the resiliency idea. But that analogy sort of limps to me, because you think about, you stretch the rubber band and it goes back to where it was. Well, great. But is it better? Is it stronger? And I think that's what happens for folks who have experienced trauma in their life, is that there's like a post-traumatic growth that we can talk about, that the person is renewed in a way if they can find some healing from this, that they've been through something that no one else has been through, or maybe other people have been through and they've found a connection from that. But to know that there is a great strength that's there.
Absolutely. I think therein lies the hope. I know, as you talk about that neuroplasticity and the way that we're made, I know we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And this idea that there is hope, that we, through a corrective emotional experience and a relationship with somebody, can begin to patch up and heal and grow what relationally once upon a time was so wounding and injurious. As we're talking about trauma, I think it's important to define a working model as therapists. So, and also with the folks that we're working with. So we have a framework within which to work. And I'm interested in learning how you define trauma in your curriculum with the students you work with.
Well, this may be kind of a strange way to put it, but stick with me for a second.
I got you.
I think that if you think about, I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, and so we have a very good sewage system. We have a good water removal system. So there's all these drains that when it rains on a typical day, like today, the water is removed. And so the system works fine on a day that there's that normal rain. Just like in our lives, we've got this stress response system. So when I've got a test, or I'm being pushed at work, or maybe I'm having a fight with my friend or spouse, there's stress. That's stress, and my response system deals with that. And so it can take that in and respond to it effectively, just like the water removal system does on an average day of rain. But then the bummer is when there's a big flood and there's tornado and it just overwhelms, then the water removal system here in Knoxville gets backed up. The people can't drive down the road. They have to take other routes. So then the whole city has to adapt to it differently because of this overwhelmed system. And I think that's what happens with us when there's trauma that occurs. Really, there's something through sexual abuse, there's a violation that should never have happened, or there's, you've lost a support that you never should have lost, or something like that occurs in a traumatic experience. Whatever it is, it's your response system becomes overwhelmed. Then you have to start taking other routes and doing other things to try to deal with this system that's become overwhelmed. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, I love that. Basically, I love that. It's basically our system that's designed to deal with the day-to-day things. And I think, as you're saying, it's an event or events outside the realm of normal experiences that just overwhelm our system, and our defenses get breached, and we can't manage these things. And what I like that you're saying too is that each person's trauma is unique to them. And I think what I like about the responsive piece we talked about a few minutes ago is not just understanding trauma in a cookie cutter, kind of framework, but if their trauma and their experiences are unique to them, that responsive piece comes into, hey, help me understand what it was that you've gone through. And what you've emphasized before that I've heard is, help me understand the meaning that you've assigned to your experiences. I love that piece.
Yes, yes. If I can continue my my little
Please.
analogy here. So say like if the flood comes and the system's overwhelmed and the bridge washes out. Well, I found another route to go around the water or whatever. Well, then that other route might not be very safe for me. It might not be real
Yes.
adaptive for me because I'm always late to everything because I'm going this long way around, but I'm not going to go this other way because the bridge got washed out. I think that's what happens with us in trauma is that I'm taking this other route and it can become maladaptive. It's my way of adapting. It's the way I learned to adapt. So
Yeah.
then people come to us as providers and they say, hey, look, I'm on this back road. It's gravel. I'm always late. It's not working. What can I do to find another,
Yeah.
get back to the main route? And so I think that that's what's happening. And then you can just find this strength in yourself or find this, wow, I can have a relationship. I can share this experience with other people in the future and
Right.
help them heal. And so there is such a meaning and I think that can be found in our life that having a trauma, I mean, I think sometimes we just want to feel bad for people but really it's a chance to say, hey, look, I'm proving what my humanity is and what my dignity and my worth there is. And I can share that with others.
Yeah, that's really good. You're talking about how the very thing that becomes the set of strategies and the gravel road that we take as a result of our traumas, unfortunately becomes the very road that can impair healthy functioning in our life later on. Once upon a time in our childhood, that might have been the best and smartest, most survival strategy driven road we could have taken.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, when we come into a world that may not have those same kind of experiences or traumas, that road becomes, really inhibitive of some really healthy things going on. And I think that response, I keep coming back to this because I really like it. This responsive focus that you have
Mm-hmm.
of working to help not just understand the person that's sitting in front of you, but also helping them understand how that was a strength. And if I could, I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to come back to something in a minute. But I know one of the ways you work is through a strength-based perspective, which ties into what we're talking about right now, which has a person see and discover the strengths they have and may not even be aware of. That gravel road might have been, probably was brilliant. That's helped them survive in their lives to date, and how they can maybe draw upon some of those strengths, or maybe even just right size what they do and why they do it. So talk about that strengths-based piece, and particularly how do you teach your students to be strength-based focused in their approach? And what are some things that you teach them to look for and identify in someone's strengths?
There's
A
just so
lot.
many things. Let me say, just first of all, this is my kind of classic analogy. That say if someone comes to you and they say, "Oh, my child is truant and my child doesn't want to go to school." So then you ask, "Well, of the 5 days of school last week, how many days did you get there?" Well, I missed 3 days and I went 2 days.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Well, typically, I think we have always kind of thought, well, what went wrong on those 3 days, and what can we
right.
diagnose it, and how can we put it in the DSM, and how can we get
Exactly.
billed through insurance? But anyway, but then the real question is, what happened those 2 days? The 2 days that you got there, what worked? Well, I
Yeah.
got up on time. My alarm worked. The bullies weren't on the way to my path to school. Whatever was happening, those two
Yeah.
days. All right, let's build on those two things and
Yeah.
find the strength there. And I think that that's just the thing. And I think so many people, I have to say myself included, forget the strengths and just kind of get focused on this is what's wrong with me and these are the things that have happened to me and this is gosh, this is just I can't. But wait a minute, I made it this far. Look,
Yeah.
I'm here today. I'm able to get here and be with you all today. What a strength to
Yeah.
be able to have done that, to have done that. So I think that's
Yeah.
that's to me just in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how we're almost conditioned to look for the bad. I mean, as parenting, sometimes we say, hey, 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 very rarely do we walk by a room and see our kids playing well and say, hey, you guys are playing so well. I'm so proud of you.
Mhm.
But what we know is that those things that we reward typically get repeated. And so if we, parenting, we want to shape good behavior. Sometimes we extinguish certain behaviors by just kind of ignoring like the 3 times you were late. What did you do on the 2 days you got there on time? That's awesome. How can we replicate that or repeat that? I think is a way to get someone out of always feeling blamed and shamed for the 3 failures and looking at the strength that they do have that they may not even recognize, because the majority of the focus
Yeah.
tends to be on the negative, doesn't it?
Yes. I think sometimes I feel like this is sort of an evolutionary bonus that the humanity gets by looking at the negative, because we think, well, we always, I'm going to look at this negative thing and then I'm going to try to fix it for the future. But then in doing so, I think we become hyper focused on it and then forget, like, what am I doing right? And that doesn't mean I have to shrug my shoulders and say, okay, I'm doing this far. I can grow and build on it. That's successful for us too.
Yeah. I think sometimes too, as clinicians, we get trained, through the diagnostic process, and it's not a bad thing in and of itself, but by itself alone I'm always looking for problems, looking for, a sign, a set of symptoms that kind of help me rule in a diagnostic kind of formulation here. And that's from which I work, versus that helps me understand something. That's going to be part of the treatment, but help me understand how we got to this place. These symptoms we're looking at is going to be kind of manifestation. Yeah, go.
I was going to say that, I teach this psychopathology class for our students. And so every disabling condition that we address that's in the DSM, I ask them to think about, what are the strengths? What strengths could you draw on this? And it's not always easy, but
that
like
really
how can you draw on the strengths? And then I think then also when we start the class, I ask the students to write down for a minute, what are their own strengths? Well, then that takes 20 minutes, as opposed to, what are some of the things you like to work on? That's written down in a second. Kind of what we were talking about a minute ago.
Right.
But I think, like, if we can find our own strengths in ourselves and find our own resiliencies, then I think we can better be able to recognize it in others.
That's really good. Really good. We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Most of us spend more time at work than anywhere else doing anything else. So why not spend that time in a job you love? Introducing Triad's Jobs Marketplace, the only job site dedicated specifically to behavioral and mental health professionals. Featuring more than 1,000 open jobs from dozens of behavioral and mental health employers, and searchable by location, professional field, employment type, specialization, and more. Jobs Marketplace helps you find your next career opportunity. Full-time, part-time, or gig time, make the most of your time. To access Jobs Marketplace, register for your free professional account at hellotriad.com/BHT. That's hellotriad.com/BHT, and then click to Jobs Marketplace. If you're already a member of the Triad community, visit app.hellotriad.com/jobs. That's app.hellotriad.com/jobs. Visit us today and take your next career step tomorrow.
We know that untreated trauma can affect us over the lifespan. And you've worked with a number of people for a number of years now. What have you learned about untreated trauma over the span of someone's life?
I think if I'm driving down the gravel road, which was, like you said, so strength-based, so adaptive at the time, but I'm still on it. And I think that's what is so, I feel like from working with people and even hearing from students and all these things, that it's almost like the trauma is still so present in the person's life years later. So I kind of like this thing I learned about this grounding technique where, you help this is common to everybody, I guess, but like, can I feel my butt in the chair? Can I feel my feet in my shoes? I'm here, I'm now. I'm not there and then, and I don't have to be back there then. So sometimes, like when I'm talking to people, and you can sort of see maybe they're struggling or kind of finding themselves in the thick of the trauma again. You could even say, hey, like, what do you think of the paint on this wall? Do you like that color? And it kind of could use the senses to be brought back to the current moment and see the strength and see that I've made it this far and I am here right now. To me, that's just one thing. There's a million, but that's one thing.
No, I think something like that, though, it's about, you've said before that trauma gets imprinted. We know that trauma gets held in our bodies and it gets locked in our neural networks. And awareness alone isn't enough to move it through. But there are ways that we can, kind of carry it differently, manage it differently. And I think what you're describing here is kind of a mindfulness and an awareness that sometimes we don't see because we're eclipsed by that trauma that's kind of being lived out. And we don't even recognize just how active it is, do we, at times?
Right. Because I guess it's just become It's almost like, when you're driving home at night and, you automatically get off at the road to
Yeah,
go to your
exactly.
home. There's just this automatic thing. It's just what I've always done. Well, there's other ways to do it. Really? There's
Yeah.
that kind of thing, and I think that happens through relationship and a trusting relationship. And something too, I feel like that I always want to talk to my students about is this concept of trust, that trauma often just wrecks someone's ability to trust or ability to be engaged, in such a way, because it's been so exploited, or maybe a person has been exploited in a terrible way. And to think about, like, hey, if I'm the provider, look, I want you to trust me. I want to earn your trust. Can
Yeah.
you think about that? How would that be for you? What would it take for me to do that? And again, it's like the person you're working with is at the steering wheel, rather than
Love that.
like turning the steering wheel over to you as the social worker or psychologist. Because I think that's what's been the problem with many people who have experienced trauma, is that they're not at the steering wheel. They're back in the back seat, being driven somewhere, and their life is out of control. As opposed to, give me the wheel. I want to be able to make choices for myself, and I want to be able to decide what's trustworthy mean, and do I want to put my trust in you?
Yeah. I really like that idea too. You started with, and I'm going to come back to what you're ending with right here, but you're starting with this idea, our inherent design, our created design is trauma-free. Ideally, we have developmental experiences and things within our home where the environment is proper mirroring and healthy interactions, unconditional love, et cetera, et cetera. But everybody gets some dings and bangs along the way, some more than others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happens is that people are living these lives and they're left to kind of rehab their own lives and work within that trauma and those dents and those dings and those very, very deeply, ruptured relationships and their sense of themselves. What I love that you're doing here is you're saying, and I'm wondering if I'm going to talk about the clinical skills that you teach your students now, but it sounds like maybe one of the clinical skills is you're encouraging your students to come into the relationship and allowing the people that are sitting in front of them to have control relationally in ways that they may never have had control before relationally in their lives. And you're saying, I want to be in relationship with you, but I want you to have the steering wheel. Tell us how this could go and how might I be helpful in building some trust for you? Love that. Tell me more.
Well, two things to respond to what you just so eloquently stated. I feel like that the dings and bangs, kind of to go back to my rain and flood analogy.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes we think that the trauma is one big flood or one big tornado, but it can also be a dripping drip, 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 drip of just that's overwhelming to your system and is gonna bury a hole or whatever the drip drip will do through your life. And again, our stress response, which is a glorious thing, it's kept us alive, but it's going to respond to that either way. So I think about that, and then I also think sort of teaching students sometimes can just be sort of sometimes sharing war stories of things that we've been through.
Right.
So here's one quick story that I just want I want to share with my students. I know I'm going to share with you is that I was brand new and I was working at that alternative sentencing program, and I was a nervous wreck. I was like 22 or something, and so I would be very distant because I'd learned in school you have to be distant. You have to be. You can't have it. So
that professional boundary.
Right. So I was running this men's group. It was a disaster. I mean, like, the men never talked. They never shared. I know they were making fun of me.
That must have been painful.
It was awful. So one day I went out to get something out of my car before the men's group, and all these guys were sitting on the front steps. They were out there getting a smoke before the group started. And they're like, hey, Regan, come over here. And I said, oh, no, can I go over there? Can I talk to them? What do I do? Will I be, I went over there and kind of let my guard down a little bit. I didn't share my deepest, darkest secrets, but I had a conversation. Yeah. That group, I'm telling you, we went in there, just all walked in together, started the group, because I think they saw me as a real person for a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it's this tough thing of kind of this balance of I have this skills and I have to know this knowledge, but also I'm a real person in a real relationship with them. And I don't know, I just wanted my students all to hear that I learned from that. And not that I haven't repeated the mistake, but I feel like that I learned from that moment I'll never forget.
Yeah, I think what you're bringing in there is that we're not these automatons and we're not this kind of robotic person in front of you that's got all the answers, nor do I have to see you just through kind of a clinical lens. I'm you and you're me. I've got some skills that I can, employ here to help you. And there may be some things about my life that I don't share that's not about me, it's about you, but I'm human too. And that in that humanness and that connection, I think it's where our humanistic colleagues kind of come into play in unique ways. where it's just, I'm going to join you in this and try and right some things in your life with your help. And you're kind of directing the course here. That's very personal, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
As we're talking about this, actually transition a little bit with me here. What are some of the personal qualities that you've learned over the years in your teaching and other colleagues you've worked with, kind of the personal qualities that you see going into making a good trauma therapist?
I think flexibility, I feel like is maybe not the first thing. It's the first thing that popped in my mind. I mean, I think loving, caring, willing to
being authentic, like you just said.
Authenticity,
present,
I think is, present, authentic, and I think like it does take a bit. It's hard work to really listen and pay attention, but I think that the authenticity is almost more. Say, like if I get distracted from listening or hearing what you said, I think if I'm authentic and say, "Hey, I got distracted for a second," I think that the underscoring thing is the authenticity, which takes our own work. I mean, like it's not transactional, it's relational, and so I think I said this earlier today already that we use ourselves in this. I mean, I'm sure we all have to do a little bit of work on ourselves to try to be in that relationship and not to avoid the kind of the pitfalls that we don't want to see in ourselves. Maybe you avoid those in the client too. So I think it does take some real self-introspection too.
Right. Well, I think what you're saying there too is an encouragement that I think all clinicians get to be a part of. And I think it's part of their self-care, not just some of the daily things, which I'm curious about. I know you're a runner and I know you do a good number of things, but I'm curious about your self-care. But one of the things you're suggesting is practitioner know thyself. Emphasize the importance of that. And what do you share with your students in your trauma work about their own self-knowing?
Well, sometimes some of our students, I've had it several times when like in a class, we're discussing something very difficult, or I've been doing a workshop, and it sort of does this process of triggering is this bringing out the awareness that maybe I've had a trauma in my life, or this is ringing a bell that it's never rung before. Hey, let's talk about it. And so I just feel like I want to encourage the strength in that, wow. Thank you for sharing this with me. You don't have to go into detail. How can I help you get that? To me, I just feel like is just that great ability to recognize that in themselves and to kind of bring that forward.
Yeah, it sounds like at that point you kind of usher them or kind of encourage them maybe to kind of go pursue that a wee bit more and to help repair some of those areas of vulnerability or hurt or woundedness. Nice, nice. In your trauma-informed care model, and if you're comfortable, share with us a person you've worked with or treated in this model that stands out to you that you found really benefited. Anybody come to mind?
Oh, let's see. I can think of a bunch of people that I'm thinking about. So I go back to even when I feel like I didn't really have the full grasp of this understanding. I could go back. I worked in an inpatient unit that treated anorexia and bulimia, and a number of the clients had experienced some form of trauma. And many times had never spoken of it or never talked about it. It was something that was kept inside, and that was something they had held in. And so I'm thinking of this one woman in particular had a very, very severe case of anorexia, and physically, emotionally was just in a very, very difficult, dark spot. In fact, I was afraid, was she going to make it? And do you know that she did? And I know that it was the relationship that she had with the other patients in the unit there. Yes. That's a resource that many times we don't. And the way we had it was like some people were further along in their recovery than the people that were new. And I just think that people learning from one another, I just think that group sort of impact and that shared experience and being able to really be real with somebody that she had never had that before. And so she always referred to that as a healing factor, as those relationships, which to me, I think does point to the relational element of all this.
I like that reminder that while we are our own greatest tool and we bring that in a one-on-one, how effective it can be for therapists to learn to facilitate other relationships in a group or one's lives in healthy ways that can be corrective as well, and how that can really be fostering of, there's a universality here. There's other people like me. It helps me kind of normalize and validate that what I went through is both real and I'm not crazy. This is what one does when they go through times like this. So the therapist's role in creating other healthy, corrective emotional experiences for the person is a really nice addition, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I feel like in my years, and I think there's a greater awareness of this, thank goodness, so in recent years, in recent time, is the impact of racial trauma that people that have been truly that drip of racism, or the tornado of racism that is impacting people. And that I just feel like that our willingness to say, hey, look, I don't understand. I'm a white man. I don't understand. Help me understand your experience. Let me hear your story, your experience. I feel like that's been something that's really been opened my eyes to, and I've been glad of that.
Really good. I know there are some populations and groups that are particularly challenged with traumatic things, environments they grow up in, socioeconomic, situations. And I think what's helpful in your responsive model is it removes a tendency to blame someone for their circumstances, and instead works to understand, hey, help me, we get to explain and normalize. Of course, these would be some of your things being experienced now, and it takes away that blame and shame piece. This curriculum is pretty cool, and I'm loving to learning about it as you're sharing it with us. What are some of the placements where you see this trauma curriculum being a good fit for those doing trauma work?
I really do believe that it could apply anywhere. So this curriculum that we have, it talks a bit about the brain, and then a bit about theories, and then about some real practical clinical applications. And I feel like that if you're a case manager, or all the way up to like if you're sort of providing intensive clinical work with people, I think that this could just hopefully open up a mind or an understanding or a new way of seeing things, or a new filter to help us understand this and what people are dealing with.
Do you, in addition to the teaching of the students, do you do any training the trainer trainings?
Yeah, I do actually. That's a lot of the work with Catholic Charities USA.
Okay.
Is I've done a bunch of trainings for different Catholic Charities agencies across the country, and then this prison ministry group that I didn't really know of before, and I've done some stuff with them to help them a little bit with this perspective as well.
Really good. We're kind of beginning to kind of come home into the home stretch here. And I know a home stretch suggests some running, and I know you do some of your own self-care. Give us some ideas just real quick of your self-care process. What do you do? Oh,
so I mean, I'm a little bit rigid about it. I think that I could say maybe that's probably paradoxical to what we're really supposed to be doing. But anyway, I am an exerciser. Like I run, and I do that most days, and I play tennis. So I think about tennis. When I think about that, I think all I want to do is get the ball over the net and get it into that square. So I don't care if the budget isn't right at Catholic Charities. I don't care if whatever. All I want to do is get that ball over the net. If we could create something like that in our life, where we're taking a little mini vacation weekly or daily, then I just think that that's a renewing, healing kind of factor.
Yeah.
I think that's why we start playing when we're little kids. We just get to play, and then now here we have this other opportunity. We get a recess in our life. We should be able to create that somehow.
I think that fills up our tank, and the whole idea of putting on your oxygen mask first idea, and coming in fully oxygenated, coming in fully filled in our own mental health is going to be the best way for us to do some of the things you encouraged earlier, to be able to be authentic and to be present and to be mindful as we're sitting in front of somebody, because we are full first. That's not selfish, that's self-care. And I really love that emphasis. I also know that relationships are important. You still getting together with your mom and dad every Saturday morning for breakfast?
Yes. We do. We go have a little time together. No. So it's great. My family's super important to me. So
I know they are
great.
That's fantastic. As we kind of wind down today, if there's kind of something you'd like those listening in today to walk away with, what would you want it to be?
I just think that I know when I first started learning about this, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't learn the parts of the brain. I don't want to know what different neurotransmitters are doing. It's not about that. I really do think that you can do this. We can do this. We can do this. And I think like the more that our society knows about it, the more not beyond just providers, the more we know about it, then the better our society could be. And I just don't think we have to be afraid of it. And I think that we can do this.
Really good. This is possible, isn't it? I think therein lies another hopeful aspect of this message, that trauma can be worked with. And I think the relational component, as you emphasized multiple times today, is something that we can control and something that we can bring in to the interactions that we get to have. So, hey, as we wind down today, Regan, would you please give us some ways to contact you or the certification program to learn more about the work you're doing? Give us listeners some resource that you'd recommend.
Well, the University of Tennessee's College of Social Work website, utcsw.edu, has a site on it. And all you have to do is just look for trauma certificate, and there's the information that you could find. You can just search within the bigger site. And if you have a master's in counseling or nursing or social work, of course, and or psychology, whatever, if you want some more information about this, there's these modules that you can do. They're independent for you to be able to do on your own. You're self-guided. And so it's all the information is there. And my email address is in there. If anybody'd ever like to just connect, it's there on the website. You could.
Really good. I appreciate that. Well, Father Dr. Regan, you clearly have some great energy, man, and you have an awesome heart for people. And I can understand the nickname you've been given, Father Rockstar. That's pretty cool. And I sure appreciate you joining us today. Thanks for being on our podcast.
I appreciate you, Graham, and I appreciate this podcast and you all being able to provide this service. It's helpful to us as providers to hear fresh, new people saying things. I really appreciate it, and you're very kind to talk to me. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We will have you back at some point in the future here. It'd be nice to have that. Thanks also to those of you listening in today, and we will look forward to having you join us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Tribe Network, all rights reserved.